When we walk through a dark forest, our brains naturally search for threats. We see a broken branch and assume a predator. We look into the flickering shadows and project monsters. We do the exact same thing when we log online. The internet is full of informational vacuums, broken links, abandoned accounts, and unexplained data dumps. Because we lack context, communities often fill those empty spaces with the worst possible assumptions: ghosts, stalkers, or international conspiracies. But when digital sleuths actually dig into the source code and track down the IP addresses, the reality is almost never supernatural. We are going to follow the investigation of 4 infamous, terrifying internet mysteries that were finally solved. We'll examine a haunted Tennessee warehouse, a hijacked Reddit thread, bizarre radio frequencies, and a hidden digital maze. By examining exactly how these anomalies were created, we find a clear spectrum of human behavior. From sheer boredom to tragedy to genuine philosophical recruitment, the real answers prove that the ghosts in the machine are entirely human. Back in 2013, an anonymous 4chan user known as TQ8 dropped a set of coordinates on the site's paranormal board. They pointed to an abandoned industrial warehouse in Tennessee with a promise that anyone brave enough to enter would find a prize. 5 days later, a user named Alex took the bait. Alex documented his exploration live, uploading photos directly from his phone. His descent began in a dark, dirt floor basement, capturing images of loose wires, pill bottles, and a plastic bag filled with old animal bones. He reported hearing a car slowly crunching on the gravel above him, implying that someone, perhaps TQ8, had lured him there and was now hunting him. After posting a message that he was running for the exit, Alex went entirely silent. Eventually, an investigator hired a forensic linguist to map out the syntax of both posters. Both users applied the exact same punctuation and unusual vocabulary. Furthermore, the formatting indicated both were using a desktop computer, contradicting Alex's claim of uploading on a phone. The terrifying stalker narrative evaporated. It was a modern digital campfire story, a single bored internet user creating 2 different characters to manufacture an urban legend for his own entertainment. Our next case jumps to the physical airwaves of Portland, Oregon. In 2018, locals tuning in to 96.7 FM were hit with a deeply unsettling broadcast. Instead of music, the frequency pumped out hours of repeating deep bass tones, erratic static, and cryptic noises. Reddit users panicked, theorizing they had intercepted a covert number station, a frequency used by foreign intelligence to transmit encoded commands to spies. The fear intensified when the station began playing heavily distorted, chopped-up speeches from John F. Kennedy. The broadcasts grew increasingly eerie, mixing in fragments of Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice, layered underneath actual NASA launch commentary from the old Apollo missions. It sounded like the soundtrack to a psychological thriller. To find the source, researchers pulled the official FCC database records for the area. The license for that specific low-power frequency belonged to the Community Alliance of Tenants, a local Oregon nonprofit fighting for housing justice. Around the time the strange noises started, the nonprofit had quietly announced a partnership with an experimental local radio station. In the broadcasting industry, there is a very common tactic called stunting. When a station changes ownership or prepares to launch a new format, they play bizarre, repetitive, or confusing audio on a loop to build curiosity. The Portland number station was entirely mundane. It was an attention-grabbing marketing rollout. Sometimes a mystery lacks any intentional design at all. In 2010, a Reddit user named Yay Video Games replied to a standard discussion about modifications for the game Oblivion. Without warning, his sentences fractured. He began rapidly spamming variations of a single phrase: "Ubisoft goes Steamworks, bye-bye, always on DRM." He posted thousands of times in a matter of hours. He bolded letters, injected special text symbols, and linked images with shaky handwriting. The sheer volume and erratic formatting convinced onlookers they were dealing with a malfunctioning bot or a sinister alternate reality game waiting to be solved. Years later, internet archivists tracked his unique writing patterns across a tiny, forgotten subreddit called r/cleanliness. They discovered a cluster of different usernames interacting with each other, all sharing the same bizarre typing habits and posting times. They weren't separate people. They were multiple accounts controlled by one individual. Reading the exhaustive comment history of his primary account revealed a devastating reality. He was a man living in Melbourne, enduring severe chronic fatigue syndrome and unrelenting physical pain. To cope, he was consuming extremely high daily doses of opiates. He detailed growing up as a strict Jehovah's Witness, where childhood fevers caused him to hallucinate shadows emerging from his walls, visions his family told him were actual demons. As an adult, heavy medication and severe sleep deprivation caused his perception of reality to completely and continuously fracture. There was no hidden code, and there was no game. The Reddit thread was simply the public documentation of a severe medical breakdown. A sick man got stuck in a cognitive loop about digital copyright protection, unable to stop himself from hitting send. Our final case involves the highest level of intent, where digital mystery bleeds into real-world philosophy. In 2013, a quirky indie game called Kanye Quest 3030 circulated online. It was a joke RPG where Kanye battles a clone in the future. But if a player typed the word ascend into a specific dialogue box, the cheerful music cut out, and the screen went black and white. The game warned the player that the RPG was a front. It then forced them through an empty, dark maze, locking progress behind obscure 8-letter passwords. The software explicitly demanded real-world personal information from the player and asked for permission to interact with them and their possessions for the next 2 weeks. The demand for personal data immediately sparked rumors of a digital cult. Tech-savvy players scoured the game's code and traced the domain registrations of connected, cryptic websites. Everything pointed back to a single name, an artist named Nick Lyons, operating a supposed imprint called Ascensionism Records. Ascensionism is an obscure, pre-existing belief system. It dictates that every person has an ethereal soul that lives through multiple lifetimes, and any suffering you experience is a punishment you agreed to in a previous life. The group backed this doctrine with an active, real-world telephone hotline. Inside a secondary game linked to the same creator, investigators uncovered actual voicemail files from that hotline. They were audio recordings of real people who had followed the puzzles, stating their names, reciting passcodes, and asking to learn more about the philosophy. Kanye Quest 3030 was entirely deliberate. It operated as an intricate digital art piece, constructed specifically to serve as a genuine recruitment pipeline for a real-world esoteric belief system. When we peel away the static, the broken code, and the anonymity of these digital legends, the monsters vanish. We are left with a bored writer testing his fiction, a quirky marketing team trying to launch a radio station, a suffering patient in desperate need of medical help, and an eccentric artist screening for initiates. The internet acts as a massive, fragmented mirror. It takes ordinary human intent, whether it's commerce, pain, or curiosity, and warps it into terrifying digital lore. While we search for ghosts inside our servers, the reality is that our collective imagination creates them to fill the silence. So the next time a creepy, unsolved mystery surfaces on your feed, resist the urge to look for the supernatural. Instead, look for the humans sitting behind the screen.